Sir, just now, because of this, in between, sir, because of this connectivity problem, we requested all the deputy commissioner to introduce to the speaker, and they have introduced themselves, sir. Now I request, I take this opportunity to welcome Commissioner, sir, once again. Sir, kindly formally inaugurate the series of webinars today, and then please bless the participants and deliver your inaugural address. Commissioner, sir, please.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Prabhakar. Respected Shri Ramkumar ji, founder of Leadership Center Mumbai, Dr. Vijay Lakshmi ji, Shri N.R. Murli ji, directors at IIT Mumbai, all other colleague deputy commissioners and assistant commissioners who are participating in this webinar. A very good afternoon to all of you and namaskar. It is my great privilege to formally announce this webinar, this series of webinar as open. I'm quite delighted to be with you all on this inaugural session of this webinar series, which aims for deliberation on a very, very important issue in the times of COVID-19 pandemic. The topic of all this webinar series is possible options for the schools in the present constraints. Such an important topic. So I'm glad to be with you all. We have had some interaction before on these issues. We have talked about online learning and online teaching, and you all have done tremendous work reaching to about 85 to 92% of children on various days, and more than 90% of teachers got connected in online teaching. But online teaching and online classes were only one facet of the challenge which COVID pandemic has presented to us. So it is such a high time to have a series of webinar like this on topics which concern us all, and the 13 lakh odd students and their 2 million odd parents who are the most important stakeholders in KV Sangathan. I want to place on record my appreciation for ZIIT Mumbai, which has taken this initiative and planned this series of webinars for 5 days starting today and up till 24th June. Many scholars and experts from the educational world shall be participating in this series, and they shall talk about the practical and viable solutions to the problems which are facing today. I thank them all in anticipation, and I thank all of you also for taking valuable time participating in this webinar. Other than Professor Ramkumar ji today, we shall have experts from Tata Institute of Social Science, Professor Padma Sarangapani ji, and then we'll have from University of Mumbai, Professor Radhakrishnan Pillai ji, then from IIT Bombay, Professor D. Parthasarthi and Professor Japta will be keynote speakers on different topics such as reimagining learning, resilient schools, aims of resilient schools, insights from ancient education system of India. Even reference has been brought to the great thinker Chanakya ji. And we'll also be talking about meeting multiple educational objectives in online learning and online evaluation, etc. As we would all appreciate, we are all here for all-round development and holistic growth of the children given in our system of KVS. Their holistic growth is the central goal, the focal point of all our exercise, all the education which we impart. We as the educational administrators, most of us sitting in this webinar are presently educational administrators. In the past, many of them have been able teachers. And these educational administrators are so ably supported by our enthusiastic teachers. And all of us ought to do our best to work with the students in such a way that he or she can realize her or his potential and discover her limits. If we could assist the child in identifying the latent talents, the hidden talents, I think we have won half the battle. We definitely wish to have children who are mentally alert after they come out of our system, after we have done our bit, who are mentally alert, who are physically fit, who are emotionally balanced, and also those children must possess the correct societal values. That perhaps should be our aim. And therefore, all our learning approaches must be adopted to realize this goal, isn't it? So, in COVID times, now this situation becomes even more challenging. We are confronted with an unprecedented situation. Nobody knows the details of how this virus is going to behave, and the future is quite uncertain. And yet we have to do our duty. So we have to find ways and means to overcome this peculiar, this difficult, this unprecedented situation now. And we have to impart education to our students without calling them physically to their schools. So we have to find ways and means. As far as today's topic is concerned, it is so important, and it is widely believed. You all are educationists, and you know better than I do that modern educational theories talk about three teaching learning domains. One is cognitive, one is affective, and one is psychomotor. And these were developed in 50s and 60s and 70s. And the cognitive domain, as Mr. Bloom would have defined it, and the later thinkers and educationists and philosophers have further evolved on it. The Bloom's concept of cognitive learning is now talking about 6 levels of learning, which includes remembering and understanding, and then applying those concepts, and then analyzing, evaluating, and finally creating. Creating, such as putting elements together to form a coherent whole, the functional whole, so that there is new generation, new plan, new production, and we move further. So this cognitive domain is considered to be, as I am told, I learned it talking to all you educationists in the last 4 or 5 years. This domain, this cognitive domain, relates to activities of the brain, and it is considered to be one of the most important domains out of all three. So wonderful that we are going to talk about it, and all. I'll not take much of your time. You are all eagerly waiting to listen to the pearls of wisdom from Shri K. Ramkumar ji, his keynote speech. And I once again thank Shri K. Ramkumar ji, and I also thank Shri N. Murli ji for conducting all this. And I extend my good wishes for a successful 5-day webinar series. I hope the initial hiccups which we had just now, this technology had its own ups and downs. We just witnessed. We were all disconnected. So I hope this doesn't occur again in the next 5 days. And I thank you all from the core of my heart. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for inaugurating the series of webinars. Before I request Sri Ramkumar to speak on the topic, I just want to introduce about his, his background to all the participants, all the listeners, all the Deputy Commissioner, Assistant Commissioners. Sir, it's a great privilege to me to introduce you to all the audience today. Sri Ramkumar is the founder of Leadership Center, and he has developed some modules, and according to him, he do not believe in the development of leadership based on the skill-based approach. He believes that the leadership is a personal resource which we all have. It is by making individuals aware of their leadership resources and enable or limitations to place on their leadership abilities. What a beautiful concept it is. Ramkumar ji, really wonderful approach. Sri Ram Kumar has retired as Executive Director on the board of ICICI Bank, and he was also on the board of ICICI Bank in various sister organizations like ICICI Prudential Life Insurance as a board member, and also ICICI Ventures. And finally, before he retired, he was also working as a president of ICICI Foundation. See, Ram Kumar likes to be called as Ram. How beautiful it is, how simple and humble. Ram Kumar ji, very nice to listen this. He likes to be called as Ram. And Sri Ram Kumar also worked in the Hindustan Aeronautical Limited, Hindustan Unilever Limited for more than 15 years. And out of his total 32 years of professional experience in various capacities in human resources development and business management, but yet he has got a lot of passion for developing modules for leadership development. Really, it is very, a rare quality to be seen in people. And he also respect to leadership development and specific emphasis. His emphasis on the modules is how to help individuals to expand their leadership capabilities and organizations strengthen their leadership pipelines. This is his module. And Sri Ram Kumar also has got his own blog. He keeps on writing material on his blog, and he also invites all of you also to write on his blog. And finally, I would like to say that there is a colorful feather in his crown. Ram Kumar has published a book titled Leveraging Human Capital, a practitioner's perspectives, published by McGraw Hill Education Private Limited. So this is a wonderful output of his experience. So it's really glad to me to introduce such a great personality to all the participants. Now I request Sri Ram Kumar to speak on the topic. Over to Ram Kumar, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and thank you all dignitaries for this honor. I'm at heart a teacher. For all the years I worked, I spent close to 30 days in a year in the classroom. So to me, dear to my heart is learning. And on this day, it's very humbling because I am a product of people like you, teachers, to start with my mother, my first teacher, one of the most amazing mentors I've had in my life. And I, on this day, would recall 3 of my teachers to honor them. Unfortunately, all the 3 are no more. One was my Tamil Pandit, Paranjyothi sir. Without him, I would not be today sitting here and handling this session. He taught me how to really speak, actually, and to engage. And I had a father figure, my physical education teacher, Narayanasamy sir, who taught me beyond sports what life is, actually. And I had, in my later day in my higher education, Professor Krishnan Nair, who taught me what research is and who taught me what the value of statistics and how to see statistics beyond numbers, right? To make meaning using statistics. One of the most amazing professors I've ever had in my life. So I thought that I should honor, starting giving my respects to 3 of my great teachers and my mother, who's my first teacher and would always continue to be my teacher. So when Mr. Murli and Radha had a conversation with me, I suggested to them that we may, because this is an audience which is of educators, thinkers, and people who prepare the country for many years to come through next generations of people, I thought it is much better that I spend some time on the domain of learning and on the domain of how, if we have an opportunity to reimagine learning, how do we reimagine learning? Part of it is what my pursuit is right now, but I do it with adults. You are all doing with adolescents, children, and some adults. So hence I thought I'll pick up that topic. One of the fundamental issues around learning for me, all through as I grew up, is that whether we like or not, learning has been framed in the narrow confines of memory, recall, and proficiency evaluated through confirmation of your concepts through tests. In my mind, that is severely constraining learning. I'm not saying this is not required. This is a necessary part of learning. But however, I went back and asked myself a question. What is the primary purpose and function of learning? So if we were to ask Alfred Binet, who came up with the intelligence test in 1909, and later on it became an important one. A lot of people, when we talk about intelligence tests, especially in America in the 50s and 60s, it was a rage. We never went back and asked the question, what did Alfred Binet design the test for? In 1907, Theodore Roosevelt in America posed a problem asking the question that bright children do not require teachers. Bright children, if you can structure content, by and large will pick it up. It is not necessarily people who, I'll later on come and qualify the word bright also, right? Because that is a loaded word called bright actually. What is bright and what is not bright? That itself is a question of debate. We have to ask the question actually. So Roosevelt asked the question by saying, how do we help people who find it difficult to grasp, to learn? So this was the problem. So he said most of our teaching systems are oriented towards focusing on children who absorb learning quickly and better than other people. We end up leaving behind children who find it difficult for various reasons to cognitively absorb and grasp. It is in this context the problem was framed, and Alfred Binet went to work on this problem. And when he designed the first intelligence test in 1909, he defined intelligence. He defined intelligence as the power to discriminate, the power to comprehend, the power to make meaning. So his fundamental proposition is, if we cannot discriminate one from the other, for example, if we cannot discriminate alpha from the numeric, if we cannot discriminate the additive function from the deductive function, and if we cannot understand, the next step is comprehension, that multiplication is a repeated addition, division is a repeated subtraction. If we cannot understand that, if you learn even calculus thereafter, and if you had scored A plus or whatever is the highest grade, Alfred Binet went on to say you are not intelligent. So in his mind, intelligence boiled down to the power to discriminate or find the difference between one and another. So that's why children, can they distinguish the shape in polygons from a square from another polygon which has 4 sides? A square from a pentagon. Can the child see a square and a circle in an octagon? If a child cannot see both, an octagon is a combination of square and 2 squares are arranged in a particular way and embedded into a circle. If a child cannot see the contours of an octagon embedded into a circle with 2 squares in it, the child hasn't understood geometry. There is no point in the child coming and saying the definition of a gerund If the child cannot understand the function of a noun and discriminate it with the function of a verb, and cannot understand how the derivative adverb comes from a verb and pronoun comes from a noun, and why the roots are there, but if it definitionally goes and really be able to reproduce through memory, without meaning making, without comprehension, the child, whatever the grades may be, has learnt practically nothing. A child can come back and say the definition of valence. If it does not understand what is combining capacity, the child does not understand and discriminate the difference between an element, a compound, a molecule, a mixture. The child has understood nothing in chemistry. The child can come back and say, what is Doppler effect? But if the child does not go back to the basics and say, where does Doppler effect come from? How does it relate to echo in physics? So I can go on, right? Whether it is accountancy, physics, biology, whatever subject, the power to discriminate on the basis, the power to comprehend, on that basis, the power to make meaning is what learning is all about. Not that we can come back and say, hi, this is interesting, right? Why do you say then if people don't memorize? Now, that is really where the commissioner started brilliantly with the 6 levels of learning of Bloom. Remembrance has very little to do with memorizing. Remembrance has everything to do with meaning making. Things which we make meaning of, we remember them very well. Things where we are unable to make meaning of, we memorize it and it goes into the short-term memory. So that memory lasts for less than 45 days. Neuroscientists have found it. That is why some of our brightest children study before the exam for 45 days and aided. They come back and score some of the best marks. But 20 years later, if you were to ask them not to only recall, but apply the learning, that adult who prides herself or himself as college first, class first, university first, state first, comes a cropper in applying that learning. So this is 100 years back Alfred Bennett's research finding. So Alfred Bennett put it down to say, learning which does not give intelligence, the power to discriminate, is a wasteful exercise. So I wanted us to sit down and ask ourselves a question and move on. And there is another scholar I want to really draw. This scholar is a gentleman by name Thomas Suddendorf. Thomas Suddendorf studied the evolution of humans from apes and tried to understand how does intelligence in the primates and intelligence in the humans, what happens there? He came up, right, with a brilliant hypothesis. His hypothesis was to say that, leave alone other lower animals, the primates cannot do mental time travel. Only humans can do mental time travel. So what is this mental time travel? The mental time travel is human beings can straddle with one leg in the past through reflection, through one leg into the future through imagination, and in between sits the experiencing. There are 3 human selves we simultaneously live. All of us at any given point of a time. We reflect our past, we experience our present, and we imagine our future. This mental time travel, equipping us as humans for this mental time travel, is the sole purpose of learning. Learning helps us. So what happens when we say learning? How does the neuroscience of, how does the forebrain, right? The forebrain is the seat of cognitive thinking. The rear brain is the seat of emotion. Rear brain is where hippocampus and amygdala are sitting there. So the forebrain is where the logical side sits in the left, right? And the creative side sits in the right. But this circuitry is a very interesting circuitry we need to really understand at the end of the day, right? When we are engaging with the cognitive side of the world, we are really asking this question and link it to the mental time travel, past, present, and future. What do human beings do? Human beings, how is human memory operating? Human memory stores information as schemas. Schemas are rules. So whatever we learn, the mind converts it into a rule and it stores. The rule is what helps us to discriminate one from the other. There is a shape rule, there is a smell rule, there is a touch rule, there is an auditory rule, there is a ophthalmic rule. So there is a lot of the 5 senses through which we collect the information, through which we form those rules. And those rules are called the schemas. So when the schemas sit, they are in the past. We apply the schema, the rule, when we are dealing with the present and a set of problem. When the rule works, we now know our learning is useful. When the rule does not work, we now know our learning is inadequate. Time to top up. Time to bridge the gap and learn. So, all of learning is helping human beings to learn the skill of forming the schemas, not memorizing. Memorizing is not learning. A lot of us memorize tunes, but we don't learn music. The rules of music, how to use sa, ri, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa, and the thala, and how do you put them together is different. So when we learn the rules. What are rules? Rules are relationship between one piece of information and another piece of information. How do these 2 pieces of information connect? What connects 2 pieces of information? Grammar is the rule of language. Grammar is the rule of language. Arithmetic, algebra, they are the rules of mathematics. So it's a tool. So once you learn the tool, you should be able to apply it not only to the problems for which you have practiced it, not only the exercise book, 45 exercises in maths book, 30 chapters in physics book. Interesting. But that is not important. But has the child learned to apply not the memorized paragraph in the book and reproduced in the class test? Can the child apply that when the child is called? Let us say we teach the child matrices, determinants, combinations, permutations. Will the child know where to use it? The child does not know. Then the child has learned nothing well into the adulthood. There is no point in making the child by rote remember it. So that is really where the central proposition I am placing here is that how should our learning be formulated? Do we teach the child to structure? Do we teach the child to discriminate? Do we teach the child to relate information? Meaning, does the child know how to break it down, how to build it up, how to fill the gaps, the underlying relational rules, what causes what effect? These are schemas. And if the child learns these well into, my dad is 92 years old. 92 years old. My dad can even today sit down and solve a trigonometry or a calculus problem. 92 years old. Not that he is a brilliant man or anybody else. It is just that his love for mathematics made him not memorize what is sine theta and how different it is to cos theta and how different it is to cosecant theta. What will be the application of tan theta and how different is it to the application of sine theta? Now, opposite side by hypotenuse, adjacent side by opposite side. Yeah, you can memorize it. You can apply it. You can score the mark. But if you have to calculate an incline, would you apply tan theta? Would you apply sine theta? Would you apply cot theta? 10 years later, if the child does not understand it and the child is into engineering, and the child has to relearn it all over again in the engineering, the child has learned nothing. Memorizing the periodic table is very interesting. But you'll have to really ask the question at the end of the day, how did Mendeleev conceptualize the periodic table? Why did he place hydrogen where he placed it? Why is uranium placed where it is? How would we look at an isotope? Not memory. Because one of the problems we have is that isotopes will be defined brilliantly. But at the end of the day, it becomes very difficult for the child if the child cannot really understand U322. And then what happens? Plutonium 92. And then what happens? I did my chemistry about 40 years back. I still remember a bit of it. How is an aldehyde different from a ketone? I'm repeatedly coming back to the fundamental piece. So that's one part of it, the past and the present. The other vital part of learning, which I see even after post-graduation, many people, not just in India, I'm talking about the world over, right? We end up really talking too much about India. I think an American child is no different to an Indian child, and we unnecessarily think the American children are any better than Indian children in any of these things, or American adults are any better than the Indian this thing. Many of our education at the early stage does not help us to imagine. Imagine what? The possibilities where a child does not move from concreteness to abstraction. The child finds it very difficult to shape the world of tomorrow, first for itself, then for others. When a child cannot imagine the world as it can be, the possibilities, at least the probabilities, not the certainties. The certainty is a concrete world. 9.8 is the gravity at equator. If you drop it, yes, it's a certainty. The possibility is How do I create weightlessness where gravity is 9.8? That is not the question we are posing even in higher education to our learners. At 9.8 gravity, I want to create weightlessness and say, solve this problem, young man. Solve this problem, young child. It is not an unsolved problem. It's a problem which has been solved by physics. But for the child, at this point of a time, do we teach the child to look at an abstraction for her age, for her maturity of learning, and push and stretch the child to imagine? A learning where imagination is not there cannot hypothesize. A learning which is anchored into other people's empiricity prepares you to be a clerk. Somebody who is good at repeating the empirical truths as gleaned out by other people, however flawlessly it may be. That person is only fit to grow to become a clerk, because that person will apply the rule, make no mistakes, be reliable in repetitive actions. But that person cannot deal with ambiguity, cannot deal with uncertainty, cannot deal with complexity. Of what use is learning, which when it does not come to my aid, when I have incomplete information, isn't that what we do in our test using fill up the blanks? Most of the time we don't ask the child to do, only match the following. Match the following is a lower complexity. Fill up the blanks is a higher complexity. An open-ended question where the child is required to write a paragraph, to write a note. But what kind of a paragraph and note is the child writing right now? Memorizing and reproducing word to word what is there in the textbook. We are not calling the child to apply. Do we ask the child to say, for example, if you're teaching geography, would it be useful for the child to understand, other than borders, other than locate a place? Do we know in geography the application of altitude, the combination between chemistry, biology, physics, and geography? So that is really where I believe if we reimagine teaching, we will now create the concrete with the abstract. We will bring teaching which will become interdisciplinary. How can we imagine a classroom where a physics teacher and a chemistry teacher are teaching chemical kinetics together? How can we reimagine a classroom where a biology teacher and a chemistry teacher are teaching molecular biology together? How can we reimagine our class where a mathematics teacher and a physics teacher are teaching mechanics together, motion together, rather than memorizing Newton's 3 laws? But where can two interdisciplinary teachers come together and teach? Can a psychology teacher and a sociology teacher come together? Can a Hindi teacher and an English teacher come together to explore the grammar of these two languages? That to me is higher level learning. And to believe a child in 10th standard or 11th standard or 12th standard is incapable of it, I refuse to believe it. I refuse to believe it. So I would recommend all of you to hear a lovely podcast called 13 Minutes to the Moon. It's a BBC podcast. 13 Minutes to the Moon. Use that to teach physics, mathematics in the classroom. That will teach to people the problems of how the Newton's third law. Why only Newton? It will teach beyond Newton everything. So in 13 Minutes to Moon, every invention in the world, if you go back, is done in the laboratories through interdisciplinary work of scientists. So if you don't teach children in class 9, 10 and 11 and 12, why their learning has to become interdisciplinary and not at the boundary of a physics class, followed by an English class, followed by a accountancy class. The child will not know how to relate accountancy with physics. And that's one of the problem of most of the R&D people I worked in my life in Hindustan Unilever, in HAL and other places. The R&D person has no knowledge of commerce. The commerce person has no knowledge of science. And these two people come into an organization and together they are expected to create a product which a market will buy, and the salesperson is expected to go into the market and tell a customer how does a RO purifier work, reverse osmosis. This fellow studied osmosis in the class, I think 8th standard, if I remember correctly. That's where I'm a Tamil medium boy. I say it proudly, Javudu Paravudal. I didn't even know the word osmosis when I studied in 8th standard. Javudu Paravudal. Right? Now this fellow is going to go into the market and say, right, buy reverse osmosis method because this is how it will work. The fellow doesn't even know how to really understand what is the membrane. But you ask the person, he would have scored 92% in physics, 94% in chemistry. The reverse is true. Here is a scientist who understands osmosis, can work with osmosis and create products, but does not know the dynamics or costing on at what cost will this product be saleable in the market. How do I manage my cost? So now I go back again to the Apollo project, the 13 Minutes to the Moon. You will be surprised. 90% of the people who were involved in the Apollo projects were all below the age of 27. Young boys and young girls between the age of 23 and 27 managed the American, the world's dream of going to the moon. They solved the problems and they applied physics, chemistry in an interdisciplinary manner. You cannot work in NASA if you said, I am an electrical guy, but I really do not understand metallurgy. You have no place. If you came back and said, I understand propulsion, but I do not understand material sciences, you have no place. I understand navigation, but I don't understand electronics. You don't have place. I'm going back to the original point I made. Your ability to relate two pieces of information is what learning is all about. Learning is not repeating by rote. So I studied Tirukkural. Karka Kasadara, Katrappin Nirka, Adarku Taha. I can tell you now, out of the 1330 Tirukkural, maybe I can say about 700 Tirukkurals right now. I still remember it. But the question is not remembering Tirukkural. The question is to be able to say, where would you use what Tirukkural? I use the right Tirukural for this session on learning. Karka kasadara katrappin nirka adarku taha, which means learn everything without any doubt. Thereafter, live your life according to your learning by applying it. Now, if I can use the Tirukural to the session, then remembering that Tirukural has value. If I cannot use that in this room, then what is the use of having that in my library? I would not know how to pull it, and I would not know how to apply it. I will make two more points, then I will stop, because there is no point in me putting too many things. Learning is around about perspectives. The whole meaning making, there is an outstanding cognitive psychologist, Swiss cognitive psychologist, whose work, Jean Piaget, right? If you get an opportunity, you should read his book. He worked on the basis of how human beings think, the evolution of human thinking, right? How are we wired? So, all our meaning making I started, right? Discrimination I worked with, comprehension I worked with, now I'm going to meaning making. Meaning making is a process where we know what selected information we bring in to the consideration set, and what information we unselect from the universe and keep it away, and how do we frame it. It's creating frames, category frames, classification frames. That is where we select in information. Depending upon the information we select in, and depending upon the relational rules we place there, the same information will make different meaning to us. The universe of information available to all of us is the same. The selection of information we make is different from one human being to another. Hence, the frames we create are never the same. And even if we create the same frame, and even if we populate it with the same data, the relational rules we apply to the data within that frame, between one piece of data and another piece of data, are not always the same. It is because they are not same why choices come. Otherwise, the world will be a choiceless world. When hydrogen combines with oxygen, it's one thing. When hydrogen combines with oxygen and sulfur, it becomes something else. So the whole issue of combining capacity, the balance, that is learning. How the combining capacity I create for in my children to combine data and make diverse meaning of the same set of data by applying different rules, or by altering one piece of data but keeping the rule the same by making another meaning. By 9th standard, we have to start to do this. Certainly by 12th standard, if you are not doing it, we are producing a legion of clerks. 90% of the people can call themselves engineers, doctors, whatever they want. But they will not be able to write a one piece of code. They may even come back and say, look at my grade. But they cannot, for heaven's sake, read a software code and understand it. And what is the problem? The problem is combining capacity. The balance for learning is low. So when the balance is low, Your ability to relate information is poor. Your meaning-making process, perspectives are not there. So you cannot make patterns. You cannot recognize pattern. You will only recognize a pattern you have memorized. The moment I ask you to really progress forward 8 steps to what the pattern would look like without showing the intermediate 7 steps, you will not be able to tell me how it will look in the 8th step. You can only linearly progress step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4 to step 5 to step 6 to step 7, and then you say this is step 8. That is low capacity building and learning. Step 1 to step 8. Can I connect it? So the problem on Apollo 13 was I had 100 ampere of power in the spacecraft. 100 amps is only useful to run your hair dryer for 3 hours. Now, out of the n number of functions, this power is to be used to really perform on the spacecraft, which is crippled. What are the 10 functions? If they are not functioned, right, the spacecraft will die. Can that be comprehended in the next 2 hours? Because power is depleting by the minute. And in the 2 hours, if the person cannot identify the 10 vital functions which will override everything and consume the power, and only the residual power will be then used to the by rule the 11th and by rule the 12th and by rule the 13th. Then what is the point in learning physics, mathematics and anything? It did not come to use when you wanted it. But in Apollo 13, John Aaron, Gene Kranz, Busidi, they sat down and they cracked it. Lithium hydroxide cell, which absorbs carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. How do I create capacity? By cleaning it in the space. What cleans lithium hydroxide? Bases the material available within the spacecraft 250,000 kilometers away from the Earth. Can you think through it without any book available in the next 20 minutes? Meaning making. That is learning. So, learning should teach people to explore. Learning should teach people to experiment. Moving from the known to the unknown with the aid of the teacher in the classroom when the child is trying to really comprehend and make meaning of the unknown while the teacher is there. Not repeating the known better than any other child. The child which repeats the known better than any other child is not necessarily a better learned child, whether in the classroom or in the life. The child who explores, the child who experiments, and while doing it falters is the child who is learning. And the teacher who encourages this and handholds it and moves the child from one known to an unknown, and a repeated unknowns becoming known, is the new teacher. And that's how I want us to reimagine learning. I know the difficulties of the current curriculum. I know the difficulties of the current system. I know the difficulty of the world we live in. But if you and I don't reimagine the world of tomorrow, And if you and I say we are only good enough to apply the schemas of the past flawlessly into the present, then we will be failing our future generations. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I was provocative, but I thought this audience of intellectuals require provocation.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments, everything, criticism, alternate constructs, everything is welcome. It's a learning place, and I am not a wise man.
Thank you, Ram Kumarji, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. Now I request Deputy Commissioners and Assistant Commissioners, if you want to ask any questions, please. We have some more minutes with us. If anybody
Sir,
wants to
not
raise...
just questions, sir. You can make your proposition.